Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the CostofCarry podcast. Today, I'm joined with Tanya Sale, who is the CEO of Outsource Financial. Tanya, thank you very much for being here. It's great to get you on the podcast, and thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule. It really means a lot.
My pleasure. Anything for you, James?
So, Tanya, from the magazines and award ceremonies, you and Outsource have done it all. You're recognised as one of the top female leaders in the nation and also around the world. I would be surprised if people in our industry haven't heard of you. But for those who haven't and heard of you, Outsource, and your accomplishments, perhaps you could give them a little introduction into who you are and what Outsource is.
As you know, I'm CEO of Outsource Financial, but my background has been very heavily weighed to the finance and banking world. So when I was a young'un, many moons ago, I started at, what was back then, Metropolitan Permanent Building Society. So I'm a Queenslander born and bred, but of course been down in New Sydney now for nearly 19 years. So I have a very strong banking and finance background, James. And from there, I just went through the ranks of the bank, which was a major bank up in Queensland. And then I was headhunted to come down to New South Wales. And I guess that's where my profile really started to take off, because being in Sydney was seen to be one of the major hubs of the finance and banking world. Still is today, all around the world. So I went through, as I said, the ranks and got a very, very strong background in many components and sections of the finance world. And I landed in the third-party sector, which is the mortgage broking sector. And so I helped build, with one of the major banks, a third-party division. And of course, that became very, very successful and rewarding and profitable for that bank. And I learned a lot in my time there. And I loved it. I loved the industry. I loved the mortgage broking industry. And from there on, I went to work for a aggregator, which was very heavily weighted on the professional services sector. So from there, I built an aggregation group for them, and I fine-tweaked what they already had. And again, that was very successful. So I got headhunted by one of the largest independent financial planning wealth groups in Australia at the time, and was asked to build a aggregation group for them, for their wealth group, in which I did, and it was award-winning and everything. But then I got thinking, and a lot of people were nagging me as well, why was I building all these things for everybody else? Why not build your own aggregation? Because they were my models. I created models for the professional services sector, which Outsource is based on. And it just grew from there. So Outsource was born. I went into business partnership with Andrea Tassis, who I'd worked with over the years. And if I was ever going to go into business with anyone, it would have been Andrea. So we built Outsource Financial to what it is today with, of course, the team. So the team is very important for us overall, because I was only saying meeting with a big marketing person yesterday, and both Madeline Dart and myself mentioned that we believe our brand is the team. So we built Outsource. I built Outsource and it became, and he is award-winning. We wanted to do things that were different to any other person or group out there or aggregator out there. And along my journey, I've been very honoured to achieve many awards and recognition. Some have been, as you would know, I was named as in the 100 global individuals across, America, the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, APAC, all around there, as one of the most influential 100 global. So that was major for me, because then it took it outside of the realms of Australia. I was named CEO of the Year for the Women in Finance last year, which was just amazing, because it was against all over the financial services industries. I've been on television as an industry expert, recently with The Secrets of the Money Masters on Channel 9. In the aggregator space, Outsource has won Aggregator of the Year a couple of times. And we'll just keep on being innovative and trying to come up with different things that's going to assist the industry and our members. To the original question, very strong banking and finance background.
Yeah. Superstar. Just before we get into the high level stuff, back in April this year, 2020, marked 10 years out of Outsource Financial. Congratulations, that's fantastic. But so you've mentioned you've had that history in seeing not only your own being an aggregator yourself, but also developing other aggregating models. What changes have you seen happen in that time and being at Outsource, and also like how have you responded to that?
Well, there's been a lot of changes. I mean, in the last 5 years, we've had so many changes, not just within the finance industry, but overall. It's been very challenging. What I've seen is, and I can speak on behalf of Outsource, that we've seen that we've really stuck to our knitting. What I mean by that is that we've really concentrated on what we were built for. We didn't go in like some of the other aggregators did and added a financial planning arm to their aggregation. I was always against that, because if you have a look at our member distribution, you will see that, there's accountancy groups, there's financial planning groups, which, remember, that's what the models were born on, professional services sector. We didn't want to, and of course then we added mortgage brokers. Core business was mortgage broking. So for us, we didn't want to do things like that, like some of the other aggregators were doing, because for us, we saw that was competition. We would be in competition with our own members. That's why we never went down the path with some of the other aggregators did and had their own branded label out there to the consumer. So that's what I've seen over the last 5-6 years, that this is what some of the other businesses are doing. We never will go down that path, because we will never be in competition with our members. Another thing that we've seen is regulatory. There's been major regulatory changes and I guess reviews of our industry, and we've had to adapt. So we've just now come out yesterday, ASIC's come out finally with their best interest duty regulatory guide. So we're going to have to drill down on that to see what amendments has to be changed. So if you ask one thing, what I've really seen major is across everything is the regulatory component that our industry has had to go down. We've encountered a real commission when we shouldn't have encountered a real commission we got thrown in underneath the bus on that. But from all that, we're seeing a very vibrant and strong mortgage broking or third-party industry coming to the fore.
Interesting. And just on that point of regulatory change, I think there's some borrowers may feel a little bit confused when it comes to putting their trust into a broker, or where should they put their trust, in the broker or the lender directly. And some feel as though that already having that banking relationship is enough, and they keep comfortable keeping everything where it is.
I think it's a good word that you just used then, comfortable. I don't think any consumer should be comfortable if they're just dealing directly with a lender. What a mortgage broker does, it provides a value add. The mortgage broking industry writes nearly 60% of all mortgages within Australia. And that's just going to keep on growing. And the reason why it's going to keep on growing is because the mortgage broker adds value to the consumer. And what I mean by that, it offers them choice. It offers them the knowledge. It offers them, a review every 12 months to make sure that what their situation was when they first got the loan hasn't changed, then the whole situation will change for them. Hence, their lending space will probably need to be changed. I remember that before the mortgage broking industry really, really took off, people were sitting on standard variable rates. Now, let's face it, no one should be sitting on a standard variable rate now, because there's so many other discounted on that variable rate available. But if you just go to a branch or a bank, you're not going to know. Remember, knowledge is gold. And the only way you're going to be able to, the consumer is going to have access to that knowledge across the board is to use a mortgage broker who are accredited with a number of lenders, and that's their role to know what each lender is offering. What that then achieves is that consumer is actually getting the product that suits their wants and needs for that point in time. When you say trust, people are trusting mortgage brokers more and more. Figures don't lie, James. And when all mortgages in Australia, 60% of all mortgages in Australia are being written by a mortgage broker, I'll tell you now, that just answers your question. Who does the consumer trust? The mortgage broking industry or straight through to the lender?
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. And like that's also like the broker has the ability to grow with the client as well. Obviously, they may start simple, straightforward finance, but as soon as their business, if they're self-employed, starts getting a bit more complex, their types of lending needs to diversify, the types of lenders they need to diversify with. I think that's, like you mentioned, the value add that the broker can provide.
Oh, totally, totally. And it's imperative for that mortgage professional to really stay close to their client, because life changes. Life throws us curveballs all the time, and that has an impact on one's household. And usually the major point in that household is their financial situation. So it comes down to the relationship that the mortgage brokers have a strong relationship with that client. And that just goes through, you're right, ongoing.
Awesome. And just on that point, you mentioned curveballs, which is a good segue into this next point about the recent 8 months Australia's had. Like, we'll be honest, it's been very difficult with bushfires. You've had lockdown and, all the confusion that's come through that. There have been a few changes that have come through your lending partners, and especially also through the government as well, to assist in or complement what the lenders are trying to do. Any comments on what you're seeing in the industry or market when it comes to that?
Well, yes, one of the major thing we've never, ever experienced in our lifetime a pandemic. Yes, we've gone through the Royal Commission. Yes, we've gone through bushfires. Yes, we've gone through drought. Yes, we've gone through floods. This is all within a period of probably 24 months, James. And then now with the pandemic, which has just rocked, just not the finance industry, but many industries in the economy. So what we're seeing through that is, of course, lenders. They've been rocked as well. Yep. So the policies have changed. At one stage, they're daily. And we just go back just quickly to the question you asked me before, why, about a mortgage broker. It was through all this that the consumer turned to more and more to the mortgage brokers, because they were on top of all the information coming out from the government, from the lenders. And so it was all going into one space. Now, the consumers were, of course, if they were very confused, so were we overall. What it has seen, though, is we've seen the lowest interest rates ever in Australia. And what we anticipated with this COVID lockdown and with everything else prior that happened is we all budgeted for, we all predicted that it was going to be an absolute shocker, really bad in the June quarter, coming back a tiny bit in the September quarter, and then hopefully getting a little bit better for December. We've seen that not happen. What we've seen is that the consumer have, I guess, taken the opportunity of the lowest rates ever, and we've seen a lot of refinance. We've seen cash out because people were losing their job or they were put on, on hold. So we saw a lot of that happening. We've now started seeing that the property market, yes, whilst it will fall, it's not going to fall as much as what was predicted. So we're seeing record months on that side. What it also shows us through all this is that the business sector is never going to be the same. We will do things differently. It showed us how to do things differently, even communicating to the consumer. We've still got a journey to go on this, a long journey. And the consumers are confused or were confused, but I don't think they're so confused now because they've got the support of the government in relation to communication. That was unbelievable. No matter who you vote for, it's totally irrelevant in this situation. What the Australian government do was a leader on how to do it right around the world. So the general consumer was communicated with on all that. Then came our side of the business, and even on the wealth side of the business out there, the industry, we had to communicate daily. It was an experience that none of us have ever experienced and will never probably experience again in our lifetime.
Well, we hopefully never will. But extending further, and I'll give you a bit of rope here because into the economic aspect of things, like with the cash rate being at historic lows, unemployment going up, we've got small business grants, JobKeeper, JobSeeker, and also because Australia's property market is so heavily influenced by also international buyers as well. And now they're talking about a travel restriction until 2021, possibly longer. Do you think the duration of that will permanently affect Australia's lending landscape?
The lending landscape in Australia quickly bounces back. You'd be surprised how quickly, when turmoil has hit that space, how quickly it bounces back. And we're seeing it now, that there's record lending in a COVID situation. Now, who would have predicted that? I think what it will do is we'll see other players come into the market. And I mean from overseas as well, where we're starting to see some of these big funders starting to trickle in and thinking that this is a great opportunity. Travel restriction 2021, it gives Australia, I guess, an opportunity to really start looking at what we've lost in the past, i.e. our manufacturing. I think you'll see the government now will start changing some legislation and rules which ruined our manufacturing in Australia a long, long time ago. I think you'll see a bit of a bounce back on Australian-owned and Australian-produced products. Hopefully that will then lift Australia. What we've learned out of all this is that we were so dependent on a couple of other countries, one in particular, and I think that dependence will start, whilst it may still be a little bit there, it's going to wane and will, as a country, start to develop within. Look, there's going to be changes. There's going to be changes, no doubt about it. But it's how we react to those changes and implement things that's going to be better off for this country. And that means in dealing with other countries as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It doesn't make sense for us to go back to how the model was before. What time has proven is that it can't sustain itself or maintain itself, especially in an event like this, which
Correct.
is something we've always got to be prepared for. But as you mentioned, I think on the consumer side of things is that we're going to be in a period where we're trying to almost rediscover our identity. And
I totally agree, and that's a really, those words that you've said are really good. We're going to rediscover our identity, and I think you'll find the consumer will get right behind this. As I said, we're starting to see in the retail side, it's picking up. It was slammed, but I mean, what we must put our hand on our heart and be very proud to be Australian of what happened within this pandemic. The Australian population really, really supported the local businesses. And some of those local businesses that I speak to in the food industry have said they were able to survive because all of a sudden they were a restaurant, but they were doing takeout. And it was the population that said, okay, we're going to support you. We don't want to see you go down. And it's amazing. There's stories out there that would really go, wow, that is just unbelievable. You see retail shops now having Christmas-like business. The government has been very supportive on this side, and I probably have no doubt that they're going to extend the funding they've put in. I'm starting to lose track of it all. They've put massive money into the national housing situation to get construction going again. So we have a very good government that's really putting things into it. But, the Australian population's got to give themselves a pat on the back as well.
One of the things that I found interesting, not only now, but as when I first was inducted to Outsource, you mentioned that the relationship that brokers and lenders and aggregators have with each other is more like a partnership. So, for example, I remember you told me one time we consider your panel of lenders as your lending partners. And if you think about it in that relationship manner, has a role to play when it comes to developing the best model forward for the industry, education and compliance and due diligence and, participation and advocacy. I suppose that's where the relationship is really heading towards. So, just on that note, do you think what's going to come out now is going to be the way forward for the industry, or this has been the catalyst for the future of the mortgage industry?
Our industry will always have changes, always. But I do think it will help the path we go down. We've been on this path in our industry for a while now. You talk about the relationship. This industry cannot grow and did not grow based on not having relationships. Yep. What this has brought to the core is that it's so imperative that the aggregator has these relationships with the lenders, hence has these relationships, then that flows on to having relationships with mortgage brokers, because it's the mortgage brokers that will be supporting the lenders to get back on track through all this. It's the aggregators that will be working with the lenders to ensure policies enable the mortgage brokers to get back and get the consumer confidence and everything like that. That's always been a work in progress. But at Outsource, we've always, as you just said, believe in business partnerships. The lenders are our business partners. It's as simple as that. Whatever they do affects us. Whatever we do could affect them. And then you throw in the mortgage broker side, and they're our business partners as well. Their success is going to be our success. But we've got to ensure that we protect our members in relation to everything that's going on. So our mortgage brokers, our members, they should be looking to their aggregator for a lot of this information, because it's the aggregator that is responsible and accountable for the behaviour of their members. Just ask ASIC. And then that goes through to the lenders. The lenders then go back to the aggregator and they say, you are responsible for your members. So if you don't look at our members, our business partners, we'll all be in a lot of strife. It just wouldn't be successful.
Oh, okay. That's great. Yeah. And lastly, Tanya, I know back in when lockdown happened back in April and May, Outsource went very, very strong in the webinar online education space with the Learn-A-Lot-Palooza. Now, I know it's a bit hard to predict how things are going to plan out for the rest of the year, but is there anything planned, any events or roadshow events that Outsource has got?
Yes, as I said to you before, the way we do business is going to change. A lot of people aren't back at work, James. So this virtual side of things is just going to probably increase. So the roadshows where we used to have face-to-face, I don't think we'll be having them for a while. But we always like being ahead of the curve. So we wanted to carry on from Learn-A-Palooza, which was the Learning Festival. So we have our training and education facilities called iEducate. As you know, we're very passionate about educating our writers to educate the consumer. So it's a flow through. We'll be doing a national learning series called iEducate, and we're going to include topics on technical skills. So we're going away from the lending component of it, because we run so many educational pieces on the lending and we work with our lender partners on that. We've got to now look to educate or assist our members being a business owner. So we will have topics on technical skills, compliance best practice. Regulatory's overtaken this industry, and that's not going to change going forward. Best Interest Duty came out, so we're going to make sure all of our people are up to speed on that. So compliance best practice and business owner upskilling. So we're going to do a series on those types of training. Now, we'll do that virtually. But from what we've learned out of this whole not even just 1 year, 2, 3, 4 years, is that it's imperative for us as an aggregator, and we take what we call our business partnerships very, very seriously. So we are going to announce, and we've built a business hub, a business centre and training facility where a lot of our training will happen when we come out of lockdown fully, and a business centre for our members. We don't want our members sitting out there by themselves ever going forward. So we have this property, we gutted it. It's a business and training facility that our members are also able to use. So they can go in there and have a professional setting when they're meeting their clients and everything like that. And that's part and parcel. That's complementary from us to our business partners. So that's going to be big. We're also going to look at going forward in creating a virtual studio. All these things, whenever there's a challenge that's been thrown at us, James, one should always look for the opportunity. That's what Outsource Financial has done, and that's what we'll take our members with us on this journey for opportunity, and that will see them better business owners, successful, and most of all, having such a strong relationship with the consumer, which is their clients.
Fantastic stuff. Tanya, those are all the speaking points that I thought I'd cover in today. I don't want to keep you away from your busy schedule, as I mentioned in the intro, but is there anything else that you would like to touch on before we close off?
Within the business, maybe looking at changes. As I said, it's not going to be the same. Going in and having a really good hard look to see if the processes, the systems are all going to be there. They're going to have to change with even further regulatory oversight on them, but just work really closely with your aggregator. I know we'll be working extremely closely with our members, but no, all I just say is one word: opportunity.
That's really great insight, and hopefully we can do this again another time.
Anytime, James. Thanks for allowing me to be part of this.
And that concludes this episode of the Cost of Carry podcast. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you in the next week's episode.